On the afternoon of August 27th of 2005, at around 1 p.m., 69-year-old Riderz, a neighborhood ice cream man, was riding his ice cream truck when he was approached by three hooded men, robbed for a couple dollars here and while on his route, and shot to death near 56th and San Pedro Street. During an investigation, an eyewitness identified Deshaun Campbell, a local she knew from sitting around the neighborhood, and a 5 Broadway Gangster Crip as one of the three men she saw getting back inside the car after Riderz had been shot. Saying she went over to try to help Riderz, who had been shot in the chest, bleeding, and painfully gasping for air. She then put pressure on his wound to try to stop the bleeding, but Riderz, he was slowly growing weaker. And sadly, he died at the hospital later that day. Meanwhile, Chappell, he wasn't caught yet or implicated for the murder, but on June 12th of 2006, a police officer was interviewing Chappell in connection with the unrelated robbery investigation when Chappell said he had information regarding the murder of an ice cream man. Chappell said he wanted a lighter sentence on the robbery in exchange for this information. Two detectives investigating the Riderz murder then interviewed Chappell that same day. And while talking to the detectives, he told them he was a member of the 5 Broadway Gangster Crips, and his moniker was Lil Hitman. Chappell first said a member of the 5-6 Playboys gang claimed he and fellow gang members had shot and robbed the ice cream man at 56th and San Pedro. Then, Chappell changed his story, saying he had just happened to walk by the shooting scene and see the blood. He continued walking to his grandmother's house where he saw his cousin, Maurice Farmer, and another man, Corey Milligan, wash themselves and leave guns in his grandma's backyard. Finally, Chappell admitted that he had been present during the shooting, and he told the following story. He had been driving around that day with Milligan and Farmer in a white Toyota. Milligan was driving, Farmer was in the front passenger seat, and Chappell was in the back, with a shotgun and a handgun in the car. And at 58th and Normandy, Farmer told Milligan to stop the car. Farmer then gets out, runs up on a man, and says, "Where you from?" The man then says, "This 5A neighborhood." And then Farmer responds, "F that, give me all your shit." Farmer then took the man's phone and iPod, then got back into the car. A little while later, while driving back to Chappell's grandmother's house, they spotted Riderz pushing his ice cream cart down the street. Farmer then suggested robbing him. And Chappell said, "All right, let's run it." So Milligan, he stops the car and told Farmer to go shoot the ice cream man. When Farmer refused, Milligan threatened him, saying, "Fuck you then, I should shoot you." Milligan then hopped out of the car, walked up to Riderz, and said, "What you got in your pockets?" and shot him before he could respond. Riderz, he then falls into his back onto the street. After that, Farmer and Chappell got out of the car, ran over to the fallen Riderz, and started to go through his pockets. Farmer found money and credit cards in Riderz's front pockets. Chappell had to lift Riderz up so he can go through his back pocket, but he didn't find anything there. And while all that was going on, Riderz was making gasping and groaning sounds. But Chappell said he wasn't paying too much attention because he just wanted to find something to steal and get out of there. Chappell then ran back to the car, jumped in the back, unlocked the passenger door, which Farmer had locked when he got out, and yelled to the others, "Come on, come on, come on, let's go, let's go." Milligan and Farmer then returned to the car and they drove off. And in the car, Chappell asked for a share of the robbery proceeds and Farmer gave him each $5. Chappell then went to his grandmother's house, where he washed Riderz's blood from his left hand. He also washed the clothes he had been wearing. Look, definitely rest in peace to Riderz. He was just trying to earn an honest living, and sadly, he lost his life in such a senseless way. But man, Lil Hitman, you was a little dumbass. Think he was smarter than the cops, and even stupider for bringing up a murder robbery you were directly involved in to detectives who weren't even implicating you in that case. Then to snitch on your cousins after you get caught up? I'm sorry, but you gotta be one of the stupidest, if not the stupidest gang member I've ever read a case on. But this story isn't about crash dummies. This story is about the Broadway Gangster Crips. And while they definitely, just like most gangs, have some idiots there, they have a lot of prominent members who have made the gang a lot of money through major drug operations in Los Angeles. put fear into the faces of a lot of their enemies, and have a lot of members who have actually done a lot of good for their community. Today, we're addressing all that and much more as we address the Broadway Gangster Crips. Yeah. All right. Welcome to Cali's Most Dangerous. Let's get into it.
You'll hear a high-pitched whistle. That was a warning, a signal to peddlers that our car was suspicious.
Chapter 1. Danger Rating of the 5 Deuce Broadway Gangster Crips. The 5 Deuce Broadways are one of the most dangerous areas in Los Angeles. It's surrounded by enemy gangs, crooked cops, and even some shiesty members who are willing to take the lives of a fellow member. That's why these guys are going to receive a danger rating of a 9 out of 10. This gang is widely known for being one of the only gangster crips who have a lot of members who have gotten money throughout the years through drugs, extortion, and a wide range of other business ventures. So naturally, they had to have moved more militant and be smarter than a lot of other gangs. Yeah, try Broadway. I promise it won't go your way. Whether it's broad day or nighttime, this gang is known to let it spray. This is why they have a history of being in a lot of widely known deadly turf wars, shootouts, and rivalries with other gangs. This gang is known to defend their territory by any means necessary, and even have crazy stories recently that have played out daily for their opposition. And sadly, even some civilians.
Appears the victim and suspect had some type of verbal altercation.
Officers responded to a radio call of a shooting that had just occurred. They encountered a male on the sidewalk who was suffering from multiple gunshot wounds.
On September 26, 2011, Mary Brown and her friend Robert Donnell had been driving around late that night looking for drug dealers to buy crack from. Eventually they stopped so Donnell could buy some crack cocaine while she waited in the car. Then they drove around a while until Donnell parked under a street light near the intersection of 49th Street and Grand Avenue. Donnell then got into the backseat with Brown and they smoked the crack cocaine for about 45 minutes to an hour. The night, they seemed to go poor as usual with the two. They smoked, enjoyed their intense high, and spent the rest of their time coming down together from their drug of choice. But at about 6:30 a.m., when it was still dark, LaShawn Ross, a member of the 5 Deuce Broadway Gangster Crips, approached from the front of the car with one hand in the pocket of his hoodie. Brown, she could see Ross's face as he approached and as he got to the side of the car where he shot her. While she slumped over in the back seat, she could see Donnell get out of the car. She heard him lock the door and saw him facing Ross, who then shot Donnell in the chest. Brown also heard a few more gunshots before hearing Ross run away. She then gets out of the car and runs away screaming for help. A nearby resident, Tony Dixon, was smoking a cigarette at about 6:40 a.m. And at about 6:45 a.m., he heard gunshots and ducked inside his apartment. After the gunfire stopped, Dixon stepped into the open doorway of his apartment, saw Brown screaming and bleeding from her face, and saw Ross approaching from about 15 feet away in a jog or fast walk, holding something in his hand. Donnell, he unfortunately died from a gunshot wound to the lung and the heart, and Brown lost an eye.
Fire department responded to the scene and pronounced the man deceased.
Several suspects gave a description and identified Ross.
Once officers arrived, they found the victim on the sidewalk suffering from multiple gunshot wounds. The fire department was also called out and pronounced the man dead at the scene.
But police weren't able to find him that day. But on October 13th of 2011, Officer Jeremy Escamilla was working with Officers Al Grin and Rudolph, patrolling the 200 block of West 53rd Street, when he saw Ross standing on the sidewalk next to a pillar in front of the house, holding a black plastic bag. When Officer Escamilla illuminated him with the flashlight, Ross tried to duck behind a pillar. And as the other officers got out of their car to speak to Ross, he ran into the house and screamed, "Police! Get rid of it!" Right after that, Officer Escamilla ran to the back of the house while the other officers followed Ross to the front entrance. Officer Escamilla encountered a man later identified as gang leader Lord Kelly, crawling out of the back window, holding a large, dark semi-automatic gun in his hand. Kelly crawled back inside when an officer illuminated him with his flashlight. Also in the house, The officers detained Ross and other occupants, including Robert Burnett, Sammy Hodges, and Rosabelle Sumter. Also in the back, the officers found a large, dark-colored 9mm semi-automatic handgun next to the windows. They also recovered a small .22 caliber handgun and a box containing 16 live rounds of 9mm ammunition. On a desk close to where Ross was sitting, they found marijuana, 2 digital scales, which are commonly used to weigh drugs, a cell phone, and 2 plastic bindles of crack cocaine. Officer Escamilla also saw the black plastic bag that Ross had been holding, which contained marijuana. In addition, later firing a 9mm handgun found that the cartridge casings recovered from the scene of the shooting and the bullets found inside Donnell's car all came from that gun. Also while in custody, Ross's cell phone conversations were recorded. During a call in May of 2013, Ross told an acquaintance that his cellmate was an OG, and his acquaintance said to tell his cellmate, "What's up?" Ross also told her that he had been reckless that time he had gone to her house because he had been in possession of them 2 guns. Both the scene of the shooting and the house where Ross was arrested was located within a territory claimed by the 5 Deuce Broadway Gangster Crips. But police still didn't have a motive for why the shooting took place. But about 3 or 4 weeks later after the shooting, an officer noticed graffiti that hadn't been seen prior to the shooting on a wall on Grand Avenue between 48th and 49th Streets. The graffiti read, "Smokers K," with BGC at the bottom, which is short for the Broadway Gangster Crips, with detectives explaining that the K stood for kill, and placing the K next to a person's moniker or crossing out the moniker indicated that the person would be or had already been killed. Also saying that the territory was very important to the gang, as the more territory it controlled, the more power it had, and the more narcotics it could sell, which was the gang's main source of income. Detectives also explained the various ranks achieved by gang members within the gang. A high-ranking member was an OG, our original gangster, who would supervise daily gang activities. The individuals were recruited into the gang, their rivals were addressed, and so forth. A soldier was a member who protected the territory and protected the narcotic cells. The soldiers, they were also known as worker bees, who committed retaliation shootings of rival gang members if caught upon, carried weapons on them, and committed higher-level robberies such as bank robberies. Officers also explained that the term putting in work meant to be doing work for the gang, from tagging graffiti to committing robberies, murders, and selling narcotics. The more work you put in as a gang member, the more respect you would earn within the gang, and the higher in rank you would advance. So detectives thought that a foot soldier had committed the shootings, interpreting the graffiti "Smokers K" as meaning the Broadway Gangster Crip gang was claiming responsibility for killing the 2 crackheads. Given a hypothetical question mirroring the facts and evidence in the case, detectives gave their opinion that the shootings benefited the Broadway Gangster Crips, saying that it would not have benefited the gang to kill its own paying narcotics customers. However, it would benefit the gang to kill a rival gang's customers if they were smoking in the gang's territory.
That's what a gang is. Everybody getting together to protect their neighborhood.
What it took was a source of power, and in this case, the power was money. Money provided by the homemade, high-tech derivative of the yuppie drug of choice, crack.
Definitely rest in peace to Robert Donnell. It seemed like his life was already in shambles, doing crack cocaine in a dark street with another fiend, but it doesn't leave his life deserve to be taken. This situation occurred in 2011, and it was just a few years before the feds put their second major bust on a gang, dubbed Operation Gremlin Riderz, in June of 2014, which came with the arrest of over 75 Deuce Broadway Gangster Crip members after a murderous decade in Los Angeles. But before we can address all that, it's essential that we get into the first major operation the feds put on the 5 Deuce Broadways as we go over history of these guys.
Today, there's a new epidemic, smokable cocaine, otherwise known as crack. It is an explosively destructive and often lethal substance which is crushing its users. It is an uncontrolled fire.
History of the 5 Deuce Broadway Gangster Crips. Way gang or don't bang. That's pretty much been the motto for this gang since their foundation. The history of the 5 Deuce Broadway Crips can be traced back to the 1970s, particularly 1974. Formed near 52nd Street and Broadway in South LA, This gang came a couple years after gangs like the Brems and the West Side and East Side Crips had been established. Early on, the Five Deuces was mainly known for getting money, throwing crazy parties, and having a lot of members who got money with the gang. They really didn't start off having too many issues with the gangs, even allegedly having close ties with the neighborhood Rolling 60 Crips. But all that started to change once money started to come into play, and once the crack era started to approach. From the jump, the Broadways, they were known for having a lot of hustlers and getting money by any means necessary. Yeah, robberies, jacking drug dealers, extortion, and even heists were on the list of activities when it came to the early development of this gang. But once crack started to hit the streets, their activities went way beyond that. And the Five Deuce Broadways, they have more than a few members who are well known for all that and a lot more, including alleged prominent member Steve Robertson, also known as Whitey.
A whole generation of kids, man, are being lost to this shit. The road figures that they have, guys running around in BMWs and Mercedes with gold chains and, bracelets and things like that. Kids want to be like that. They see these guys. They want to be the same way.
Whitey Enterprises. Steve Whitey Robertson's life started off as most African-American kids growing up in rough parts of the nation throughout the 1960s. With absolutely nothing. No resources, no guidance, and most importantly, no money. On top of that, he was raised in Los Angeles. And during these years, violence in the inner city was starting to come into full form, with older gangs already existing and new violent ones like the Crips and the Bloods starting to establish themselves. So Robertson, he had already been dealt a bad hand when it came to growing up in Los Angeles. But none of that mattered. Or at least it didn't matter when it came to him getting money. Because by the early 1970s, from the age of around 12 to 16, he and his friends were known as jewel thieves. Before major drugs like crack cocaine came along, a big way for some inner city criminals to get paid was robbing jewelry stores locally and of course out of state. Well, actually, robbery, that's definitely the wrong word. These guys were on some dead president's heist type shit. But these niggas definitely wasn't getting caught up. Before he became big in a drug gang, he and his crew used to hit for $1 million heists around the country. And when that lake dried up, he began to get guidance from individuals he says were the godfathers of the black community during the time. Individuals such as Notorious kingpins, Twitty Reese, Bill Jones, Jap, Cuz, Lewis Turner, Harry Jenkins, Howard Johnson, and Raymond White. Back then, these guys moved a lot of drugs, including weed and heroin. But their biggest profits came from dealing cocaine. And already been a hustler and quick learner, Whitey, he caught on damn near overnight. And after buying his house in Laguna Hills at the young age of 17, it's safe to say Lil Whitey was doing it big. But the game, it really changed once freebase was introduced to the streets. This is cocaine that has been converted from its salt form to its base form by heating or boiling with carbonite, which is taken by inhaling the fumes or smoking the residue. But once dealers like Whitey learned how to solidify that freebase, which formed a rock-based cocaine called crack, the game, it was over.
Enterprising dealers went further, developing a form of cocaine that was even cheaper and packed a lot more punch.
This is it. The drug so powerful it will empty the money from your pockets.
Whitey took over the Los Angeles drug market and beyond once crack started to flood the streets. He did this by owning 90% of local crack houses.
When they found they could use mother's oven to concentrate cocaine into a substance ready-made for smoking,
which were mostly abandoned houses taken over by local gangs and dealers, used to cook powder cocaine in its rock form. And these were the only spots that produced this product at the time. He also had key connects to plugs who gave him great prices, which made his prices competitive to his rivals.
A huge drug cartel, which made millions, manufacturing and wholesaling cocaine to the world's #1 market.
Despite our best efforts, illegal cocaine is coming into our country at alarming levels, and 4 to 5 million people regularly use it.
He was the leader of the feared and respected Whitey Enterprises and allegedly a member of the Five Deuce Broadway Gangster Crips. This respect and close ties to dangerous and prominent members of Los Angeles allowed Whitey to maintain and control a majority of the crack and cocaine scene from around 1970 to around 1983. By these years, due to the constant flow of crack cocaine in the streets of Los Angeles, violent gangs growing and going to war for drug territory, and other crews trying to take over the drug market, Whitey, the Broadway Gangster Crips, and Whitey Enterprises began to become the target to law enforcement. This is because by the year 1984, these guys made Los Angeles a complete war zone. In the first 8 months of that year, at least 25 murders have been linked to a power struggle between rival drug dealing gangs for control of the area's cocaine market. Sources say disputes between the two gangs involved the power struggle, which involved the October 12th slaying of 5 people at a party. But here's the thing. Young Whitey, who didn't do any drugs, didn't smoke or drink, was like the real Franklin from Snowfall, because he was always putting his money to good use, laundering it through a few good businesses, properties, and accountants. And on top of that, for a few years, he set a few steps ahead of the feds by rarely being seen and having his generals move a lot of his product. Yeah, him and Whitey Enterprises, they developed drug dealing networks, employing young people, some of which carried beepers and sped up deliveries to customers as their runners, with police routinely finding $600 to $800 in their pockets of young street runners who they've arrested. But eventually, law enforcement started to connect one murder to another to these groups, with police saying, "We think Whitey's Enterprises is good for at least 15 murders." The Third World, which was another group, was responsible for 10, and there could be another 40 killings connected to this drug war. And after all the violence, deaths, and forever altered lives due to the crack era, by the end of 1984, the long-standing street organization, Whitey Enterprises, came to a stop after feds raided members of Whitey Enterprises in October of 1984. During one raid, officers confiscated 3 sawed-off shotguns, an AR-15 semi-automatic rifle, a Thompson submachine gun, and 2 handguns at an apartment on the 700 block of East 40th Place. 2 of the shotguns, 1 of the pistols, the rifle, and a submachine gun were all loaded. Sources also said that Whitey's Enterprises was battling the Third World in a struggle to fill the vacuum created by the arrest of drug pen Tootie Reese. During these years, Whitey's Enterprises and the Third World controlled at least 130 fortified South Central Los Angeles residences, grossing thousands of dollars a day through cocaine sales. Ultimately, Whitey and his crew, which included a lot of members of the Five Deuce Broadway Crips, was arrested, and he was sentenced to 30 years to life in federal prison. This operation, it definitely slowed down the activities of the Broadway Gangster Crips. The money, it kept a lot of the members in great financial positions, but once that resource was gone, it was downhill for a lot of them. With that being said though, the gang continued to grow along the way, and have produced a lot of hustlers and prominent members. But before we can address all that, we have to get into who the Five Deuce Broadway Gangster Crips are.
Copping dope. This cancer is being peddled in the open, where it's not at all difficult to find. And should you be naive, innocent, or untried, pushers will find you.
There's another one standing over there. Look at him patting his hand, think he got something.
Who are the Five Deuce Broadway Gangster Crips? When I say Broadway, I'm definitely not talking about a show or play. This gang definitely goes another way. Bars, nigga. The Five Deuce Broadway Gangster Crips, also known as West Town or the Way Gang, are an African-American gang formed in South Central Los Angeles, forming around 52nd Street between Broadway and Avalon Boulevard. Originating in the 1970s, this gang has been active for over 50 years. And over the years, the Broadways have formed multiple cliques, but in general, the Broadway Gangster Crips consist of 2 subsets, 5 Deuce Broadway Gangster Crips and the 11 Deuce Broadway Gangster Crips, with the 5 Deuce Broadway Gangster Crips being the first to emerge out of the 2. But when it comes to affiliation and card, the Broadways fall under the Gangster Crip or trade card. So they're allied with a lot of other Gangster Crips, with an exception of a few that we're definitely going to address a little later. And while most Crips have members who are with the complete activities when it comes to gang violence, the trades and the Gangster Crips are definitely known for their brutal gang members, who are well known for their intense ways. But what should already be known at this point is that the Broadway Gangster Crips have always been known for way more than strictly gangbanging. This gang, they've always been about their money. And even after Whitey Enterprises was taken down by the feds in the 1980s, this gang picked up its activities only a few years later, basically picking up right where they left off at. And by the 2000s, the Broadways, they were known for having a lot more hustlers and a lot more violent members as well, with multiple cases throughout Los Angeles. For example, on a Saturday evening on March 27th of 2010, a group of young people attended a party at their home of relatives near 68th Street and Vermont Avenue. At first, everybody was just enjoying the night, drinking, smoking, dancing, and talking amongst each other. But things started to go left at about 10 p.m. when a few of them were walking back from a corner store while others waited. Among those walking were Barnes, his brothers Trevion and Taylor Griffin, his cousins Michael Lee, Deanna Graves, DePaul Graves, and some friends, including Williams. And as the group got closer to the house, a black sedan moved slowly past, made a U-turn, then pulled alongside the group. And one or more of the passengers opened fire on the group, killing Williams and striking Barnes in his hip and lower leg. Barnes later underwent 2 surgeries and remained in the hospital for a week. And at the time of the trial, he was still in pain, undergoing frequent treatment, and was still walking with a limp. When questioned, witnesses said they heard gunfire, saw a muzzle flash emanating from the passenger side window of the back sedan, and then saw the shooter stick a large caliber gun out of the window and heard 5 more gunshots. They also identified a photograph of the car, and they pointed it out in a surveillance video of the shooting and described the shooter as a dark-skinned African-American male in his 20s, wearing braids, a white shirt, and no hat. The neighborhood where the shooting occurred was a Crip neighborhood, particularly the 6'5" Mellow Crip gang. So violence in that area was common, which is why a police presence is often seen in the area. Which is why officers Anthony Danielle and Scott Coffey of the LAPD were on patrol that evening in the area of South Vermont Avenue and 68th Street when they heard the gunfire. When they looked toward the direction of the sound, they saw a muzzle flash coming from the passenger compartment of a 4-door black Nissan Maxima, which then drove away westbound. The officers immediately followed the Nissan, broadcast their location, and requested backup. At 66th Street and Kansas Avenue, the Nissan abruptly stopped and 3 African-American men got out and fled on foot. The officers described one of the suspects as wearing dark-colored clothing and another wearing a white shirt and tan pants. The third man to exit the car was in dark clothing and wore his hair in cornrow braids. The officers lost sight of the suspects when they turned on 65th Street from Kansas Avenue, and a perimeter was set up as other police officers and a K-9 unit joined the search. The suspects, they weren't found within the perimeter, but clothing and a gun were found along the route of the foot pursuit. 2 light-colored shirts were recovered, as well as a black jacket resembling the jacket worn by the suspect with cornrows. In a carport on 66th Street, in the area of the suspect's escape route, a detective recovered a 44 caliber chrome handgun loaded with 3 live rounds. Other officers found black clothing containing a set of keys and a do-rag in the pocket of the black jacket. The Nissan was impounded, searched, swabbed for DNA, and fingerprints were lifted from the vehicle. 3 cell phones were also found in the center console, while a pair of black gloves and a stainless steel caliber revolver were found on the floorboard and a front passenger seat containing 6 empty cases. In addition, a blue bandana was found on the passenger side next to a white cell phone. And lastly, in the trunk, the officers found a loaded rifle and a black nib glove similar to the other gloves recovered. And after a thorough investigation that included DNA and fingerprints evidence, witness testimonies, and a data scrub of the 4 cell phones found in the car, detectives were able to implicate Chernobyl Russell and James Evans Jr., 2 known faraway dudes Broadway Gangster Crips, for the murder of Kendall Williams. In addition, a detective mentioned that the shooting might have been gang-related based off the location where the shooting took place, saying that he was familiar with the area of West 68th Street in South Vermont, which was near the territory claimed by the 6'7" neighborhood Crips, a rival of the Broadway Gangster Crips. The detective opined that the shooting was gang-related as the gang members went into a rival gang's neighborhood prepared to shoot someone which would qualify as putting in work for their gang. Regardless of whether the victims were gang members, such shootings would benefit the Broadway Gangster Crips by spreading fear and intimidation through the community, thus enhancing its reputation and providing the respect necessary to allow the gang to control the community and operate with impunity. Ultimately, Russell and Evans were convicted of the first-degree murder of Kendall Williams and sentenced to 75 years to life in prison. Definitely rest in peace to Russell. He had an unfortunate run-in with some known members of the Five Deuce Broadway Gangster Crips, and it sadly cost him his life. But that's the nature of this gang these days. Get money, move with the ruthless means of operation, and shoot first, and ask questions later. And these violent activities continue well into the 2010s. In fact, the Five Deuce Broadways start to make headlines again when a known member of the Five Deuce Broadways admitted involvement in a fatal shooting near Hyde Park in 2012, before being sentenced to 30 years in prison for racketeering and drug trafficking charges. Joshua Perez, who authorities say goes by Tiny Ainge, took part in gang activity such as dealing crack cocaine, robbing people on the street, and engaging in violence against rival gangs and supposedly insubordinate members of the Broadway Crips. Authorities said Perez admitted to joining other members of the gang and firing more than 40 bullets into a crowd of people walking into a rival gang's party near the Hyde Park neighborhood of South LA, 7 years before his arrest. William Sherman, a man authorities said wasn't a part of the rival gang, died in a shooting while two others were injured, and one of the guns used in an attack was discovered in Perez's vehicle several months later. Prosecutors said the Broadway Gangster Crips were retaliating against a rival gang after one of its members were recently killed. Former gang members also testified against Perez during his trial, detailing shootings, robberies, assaults, and so-called gang disciplines committed by Perez on behalf of the Broadway Gangster Crips. With his case, it was just the first domino to fall when it came to the Five Deuce Broadway Gangster Crips, because Perez, who had a large gremlin tattooed across his chest, was also being investigated in a federal investigation against the Broadways. And at this point, you know I didn't mention that gremlin tattoo for no reason. Perez, he belonged to a clique of the Five Deuce Broadway Gangster Crips called the Gremlins. And this particular clique was a subject to a federal investigation dubbed Operation Gremlin Riderz. This multi-year investigation into the Broadway Gangster Crips was conducted by agents and officers with the FBI and the LAPD. Federal prosecutors unsealed a 212-page racketeering indictment against dozens of suspected members and associates of the Five Deuce Broadway Gangster Crips, detailing how they allegedly robbed homes from across the South Bay, used women to move drugs, and punished anyone who talked to law enforcement authorities. It also outlined 2 decades of criminal conduct, including murders, robberies, extortion, witness intimidation, and narcotics trafficking. With authorities saying the Broadways made their livelihood by ruthlessly preying on innocent people that lived in the neighborhoods they claimed as territory. Also adding, what makes the conduct of this gang particularly insidious is not only the violent crimes alleged, but also the exploitation of Skid Row drug users who are already living in difficult circumstances. The members face various charges, include conspiracy to engage in racketeering activity and a violation of the Racketeering Influence and Corrupt Organizations Act, or the RICO Act, that included federal robbery charges after the gang conducted a series of robberies that targeted bank customers, weapons offenses, and various drug trafficking activities involving crack cocaine, methamphetamines, PCP, ecstasy, marijuana, and codeine. On top of all that, the indictment specifically alleges that members of the gang committed 4 murders dating back to 1987 that include fatal shootings of unarmed men with no gang affiliations in 2003 and in 2012. Threatening a surviving victim of the 2003 shooting, which followed a concert at the House of Blues on Sunset, conspired to murder a fellow gang member who provided statements to law enforcement in relation to the 2012 murder incident, in which a total of 4 people with no gang ties were shot, including a 10-year-old girl on a bicycle, fired shots at highway patrol officers who were pursuing gang members 2 years before that, and engaged in a series of violent follow-home robberies that targeted customers of the South Bay banks. And lastly, they participated in numerous narcotic sales near schools and playgrounds. Also, while committing crimes in its claimed territories of east of the Harbor Freeway, the indictment alleges that the Broadway Gangster Crips sold drugs to the Skid Row section of downtown Los Angeles, with it also saying This area is desirable to the gang because it's close to Skid Row, where there's a large and vulnerable customer base of drug addicts and mentally ill people. In the end, the massive document charged 72 members of the 5 Broadway Gangster Crips and provided an in-depth window into the gang's lifestyle and alleged operations. And ultimately, with many of the defendants facing potential sentences of life without the possibility of parole, all of the 72 defendants charged in the case were convicted by guilty plea or at trial. This operation occurred in 2014, and it definitely was a big hit for the 5 Broadway Gangster Crips. But just like the first run-in with the feds, this gang picked up its activities basically overnight and continued to defend their territory against rival gangs and dealers. Rivals and allies of the 5 Broadway Gangster Crips. The Way Gang has been around for over 4 decades. And through those years, they've been in battles with several gangs due to gang differences, territory, especially when it came to the drug trade, and of course, that good old shit. I'm just kidding. These niggas definitely was cold on the hoe. Or at least I couldn't find any stories of wars with this gang being started like that. Nah, these niggas was definitely tripping over some money though. Because of that, this gang has made more than a few allies and enemies along the way. Like I already mentioned earlier, the Broadways, they fall under the Gangster Crip or Troy umbrella. So naturally, they're gonna be cool with gangs like the A-Troy Gangster Crips, along with the Trouble Gangster Crips. And the term A's, Ways, and Mains refers to the 3 aligned gangs which normally get along with one another. The Avalon Gangster Crips, the Broadway Gangster Crips, and the Main Street Mafia Crips. But y'all let me know in the comments if they still get along. Anyways, other than a few other gangs, that's pretty much it. But man, they go to war with a lot of gangs. First off, despite being affiliated with the Gangster Crips, they feud with the 4 Gangster Crips and the 4 Trey Gangster Crips, as well as the 9-7 Gangster Crips. It's alleged that this beef started over a football game. Yeah, fucking football. On May 29th of 1979, the 5 Broadway Gangster Crips and the 4 Trey Gangster Crips were playing a football game against each other at Gilbert Lindsey Park, just for fun, back when they were still cool as hood. When a younger cat from the 4 Treys put a gun out on Gangster Lee and shot him dead. And Gangster Lee was the brother of OG Rainbow, who led the 5 Broadway Crips at the time. It said that this was the murder that set it off between the 5 Broadway Crips and the 4-Pack Gangster Crips. But y'all let me know in the comments if this is true or not. It's also said that this war is also due to the 4-Pack Gangster Crips' close relationships with certain deuces or neighborhood Crip card members who are already deadly rivals to members of the Gangster Crip card. In addition, the 5 Broadway Gangster Crips are known to mostly beef with the East Coast Crips, particularly the 6-Pack. But I did hear a rumor that these 2 gangs squashed their beef with each other, which would definitely be a great look for the city coming together. But y'all let me know in the comments if this is true or not. Did the East Coast Crips and the Broadways officially end their war with each other, or agree to be neutral, or is it still fuck each other? Anyways, they also feud with the Rollin' 40 Crips and all members of the neighborhood card. They also have had past issues with the Bloodstone Villains, the Harvard Park Brims, the Massawa and Bloods, and Barrio 50th Street. Prominent members. The Broadways have been having it their way for years, and have more than a few members who have made the gang one of the most respected in Los Angeles. But before we could get into them, I also found a list of members who are no longer with us. A few of them include Bam, Tiny Chew, Doughboy, Fat Dog, Amos Thomas, also known as Gangster Lee, Baby Goldie, Deshaun Eugene Hayes Jr., also known as Tiny Goldie, Hitman, Lil Cubone, and Rick Rock. Definitely rest in peace to them. And y'all let me know in the comments if any of the members who are no longer with us. Let their names live on. In addition, they have founders and a lot of other members who put in a lot of work for the gang. A few of them include Miss Broadway Blue, OG Crazy Poke, Way Out, Lil Tiny, OG Spark, Baby Av, Jewel, Tina, Teresa, Green Eyed Penny, Bad Tina, Lady Down, Modi, Venus, Gangster Blue, and Nene. Y'all let me know in the comments though if any OGs or founders I left out. In addition, they also have a couple of rappers who have made a lot of noise for the Broadways. And a big rapper and figure from the gang is going to be G Perico, who's been in both the streets and the rap scene for a very long time.
And pursuant to your count 3 plea, you will receive a total of 2 years in state prison.
And has been a prominent member in each realm. In the streets, he's known as a straightforward individual who stands on business whenever necessary. He also has put in a lot of work for the 5 Deuce Broadway and been in multiple cases with co-defendants and has never said a word, aka snitched on anybody. And when it comes to the music side, he's dropped numerous classic albums, including Shit Don't Stop, Guess What, LA Summers, Hot Shot, and multiple others. On top of that, this nigga's hella funny, bruh. Appearing in multiple interviews and podcasts like Community and Back on Fig, and telling some crazy ass stories and making multiple hilarious statements on each of them. But y'all definitely tap in ASAP if you're not familiar with his music. I promise you won't be disappointed. Also, y'all let me know if any other rappers who are putting out music too. Let's get their music heard. Anyways, let's get into the 5 Deuce Broadway Gangster Crips' current state to see what the gang is up to these days. Current state of the 5 Deuce Broadway Gangster Crips. The 5 Deuce Broadway Gangster Crips have had several gang injunctions and major operations put on against the gang. But these guys continue to put in work in the streets and earn their respect while doing so. That's why when it comes to the current state of the Way Gang, the 5 Deuce Broadway Gangster Crips are still one of the more active gangs in their area. In addition, the gang has grown to the point to where they have a presence in other states as well, including states like New York, Minnesota, New York, and Florida. But y'all let me know in the comments if they have a presence in another state. Anyways, that's it for the Broadway Gangster Crips. Got any crazy stories about these guys? Any close calls? Did I miss anything? Did I get something wrong? Y'all let me know in the comments. Let's have a conversation about it. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video, or if you're a part of the Danger Gang. Y'all stay safe and dangerous out there.